Good evening, everyone. It's now 6:30 p.m. and I'll declare this agenda briefing forum is open. I'd like to invite Councillor Minson to read the Acknowledgement of Country.
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. I'm honoured to be standing on Whadjuk Noongar country on the banks of the Swan River. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and respect elders past, present and emerging, their continuing cultural heritage, beliefs and relationship with the land, which continues to be important today. I thank them for the contribution made to life in the town of Victoria Park and to this region.
Thanks, Councillor Minson. Item 4 on the agenda is announcements from the presiding member. Firstly, the purpose of this agenda briefing forum. The purpose of this forum is to provide an opportunity for elected members to ask questions and obtain additional information on officer reports in the draft Ordinary Council meeting agenda. It is not a decision-making forum, nor is it open for the debate. Members of the public that may be directly affected by an item on the agenda can make presentations, deputations, statements and ask questions prior to the matters being formally considered by Council at the next Ordinary Council meeting, which in this case is in 2 weeks' time. All participation in this meeting will be audio and visually recorded and live streamed on the town's website. The live stream recording will be archived and made available on the town's website after this meeting. All those in attendance are expected to extend due courtesy and respect to the meeting by refraining from making any adverse or defamatory remarks regarding council, the town staff or any elected member. No one shall create a disturbance at a meeting by interrupting or interfering with the proceedings through expressing approval or dissent, by conversing or by any other means. All questions and statements made by members of the public are not to personalise any elected member or member of town staff. Questions and statements are to be directed to myself as the presiding member. I may choose to call upon an officer of the town or another elected member to assist with responses to those questions. Public participation time at this meeting is an opportunity to ask questions and make statements. It occurs at the beginning and at the end of this meeting. The opportunity to ask questions and make statements at the end of the meeting is limited to those members of the public who did not participate in the first public participation time, which occurs at the beginning of this meeting. Our public participation time will be held for a maximum of 30 minutes, and any additional time will be by agreement from the elected members at the meeting and will be in 5-minute increments. My usual practice is to limit the questions to 3 questions per person, and for those wishing to make statements, 2 minutes for a statement. However, if there are very few people in the public gallery, we can allow more questions than the 3-question limit and the 2 minutes per statement, because we want to hear from you. Responses to any questions tonight that are taken on notice that relate to the agenda items will be presented in the officer's report for the Ordinary Council meeting agenda that will follow in 2 weeks' time under the heading Further Consideration to that item. So, item 5 on our agenda is attendance. We have all elected members in attendance, save for Councillor Ingram, who is a late apology. There are a number of members of the town's executive management and staff in attendance, led by the CEO, Mr. Askew. Item 6, declarations of interest. Mr. CEO, do we have any declarations of interest, please?
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. Yes, I have one. Item 12.1, Councillor Biondi, a financial interest. I have a financial interest with Urbanista.
All right, thank you. So what that means, Councillor Biondi, is in relation to questions on that item, I'll need to ask you to leave the chamber and come back when we are concluded with questions on that item. Thank you. So item 7 on the agenda is public participation time, which I now open at 6:35 p.m. Now, I have been given a list indicating that we've got a couple of members of the public gallery who would like to ask some questions about item 12.1. So on that basis, I'm going to ask Councillor Biondi to leave, because you're not permitted to be a part of any of the questions or hearing the answers to those matters. And we'll just wait till Councillor Biondi has exited the chamber, which she'll do now, and she'll proceed through to another room, and then we'll contact her in due course. So from my list, Kiralee Owen, Would you like to come forward? Please press the microphone on. The buttons are at the base of the microphone when you sit down, and we just require you under our meeting procedures to state your name and your suburb, which is for our record keeping. And when you're ready, we'll look forward to hearing your questions and or your statement. And because public participation time rolls questions and statements together, you can ask questions, make a statement. You can do them in any order you like.
Thank you, Madam. Oh, it's very loud. My name's Kirralie Owen. I live on Cargill Street in Victoria Park. I currently have an Airbnb property, and I'd like to ask a question in relation to point 12.1. There's a draft that is also available, and I'd just like to look at page 12 of that, looking at the boundaries from Canning Highway, Berwick Street, Cargill Street down to Albany Highway. Those areas are going to be rechanged to just go from Washington Street up to Kent Street, round down Albany Highway, Canning Highway. My question, Madam, is why are we changing that boundary? And what is the reason for that?
Yep, that's fine. I'm going to refer that question to Mr. Cruikshank, who's the Manager of Development Services.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Council might recall that when this item came up in December 2025, there was a question or submissions from some residents around whether the boundary in that location should be extended to Berwick Street rather than Washington Street. So if I just read from the response or rationale as to why Washington Street was described as being the boundary rather than Berwick Street. It was said that the boundary was determined based upon a walkable catchment being considered to be within 800 metres of Albany Highway. It noted that the alignment of Albany Highway deviates along its length and is not rectilinear. It noted at one particular point it was around Harper Street. Washington Street was approximately 730 metres from Albany Highway, whereas elsewhere it was around 950 metres to Berwick Street. It did go on to say Washington Street was selected as the appropriate boundary, but officers accept that there is also merit in the boundary being Berwick Street. Officers would have no issue if the boundary were amended to Berwick Street. So I think it was really all around a walkable catchment of 800 metres as being the criteria, but certainly open to that being amended if council was of that view.
So I think that might be somewhat different to your question, because your question's around Cargill Street, isn't it?
Correct.
Looking at page 12 of Agenda Attachment 12.1.2, which is the revised local planning policy, and page 12 shows a mud map of the relevant area in what I would call the Victoria Park catchment, not further. And it shows in navy an area bounded between Albany Highway, Berwick Street, but the boundary is Cargill Street, but on one side of Cargill Street. The other side of Cargill Street through to Great Eastern Highway is shaded purple, which I believe, does that mean it's excluded from the short-term accommodation? I'm going to make sure I get this right for you from Mr. Cruikshank.
Thank you.
So, Madam Mayor, if I'm reading the map correctly, which I believe I am, Cargill Street obviously runs from Berwick Street through to Albany Highway. And so the map that you have before you with the purple colouring indicates that the section of Cargill Street from Washington Street to Albany Highway will be within the preferred area, whereas the section of Cargill Street from Washington Street to Berwick Street will not be within the preferred area. But again, the previous advice was that we would have no objection if the boundary was to be extended to Berwick Street, such that it would then take in the entirety of Cargill Street.
Does that help? Does that lead to the next question
That
for
does
you,
lead to
or
my
not
last
really?
question. Yes, please.
Okay.
So I would just like to ask whether we could include all of Cargill Street, both sides, because if we're looking at accessing Berwick Street, you've also got buses that lead to Curtin University, as well as, you know, the buses that are along Albany Highway, because I think that was a question or a remark that was made in relation to access. I would like both sides of Cargill Street to be included in that, because it appears that if you look closer to Berwick Street, between Cargill and Mackey Street, you've got Seabourn Lane there.
Yeah, I think what we might do is might ask the Minute Secretary, can you go to the next page, because this is the one to be removed that we were just looking at, and this is the one to be included. So this changes the dynamic, the way it looks completely.
Very much.
But it still uses Washington Street as the boundary. So
I'm looking more towards the Berwick Street end of
so
Cargill.
Mr. Cruikshank, from what you said, the administration was open to the boundary extending from Washington out to Berwick. Looking at this map, which now shows the area, this is the new area that's being proposed. So if that had the purple extended all the way from Albany Highway to Berwick Street, that would cover that entire segment. And it wouldn't have that little carve out around Raphael Park, which is the one that's on Getty Street, the way it did in the previous map on page 12, which showed a little carve out between Cargill and Great Eastern Highway as a no-go area, or as the go area, and everything else is the no-go area. But yeah, I'm going to go to you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So if you refer to that page that was on the screen, it's not helpful that the white road line that runs parallel to Washington Street to the southwest is not actually labelled as being Berwick Street, but that is Berwick Street. So if council were to agree to the submission from the resident, would effectively extend that purple line to Berwick Street, being the line further to the southwest on that map you see there.
So is that what you were?
Not particularly. I'm just being a bit greedy and wanting just Cargill Street. So down Washington, Cargill, thanks for coming. But look, if the town are happy to extend that white line all the way over to Berwick Street, that's not noted there on that picture, I'm quite happy with that as well.
Well, I mean, obviously, where Washington Street is, the next street that runs parallel to Washington and parallel to Berwick is Gloucester Street, and Cargill runs from Berwick Street all the way down to Albany Highway, so it crosses over all of those streets. All right. Was there any other question that you wanted to ask about this? Because otherwise, I know we've got another person who's on the list who may have a question that's related or somewhat different to that. So I wanted to make sure that you could ask all of your questions about
Thank you,
this.
Madam Mayor. All I wanted to ask was, is the town aware of the number of Airbnbs that are currently listed?
So when you say listed,
Oh,
you
in
mean-
Victoria
you mean
Park.
and
In
listed on Airbnb's website, or
Just
generally
that are
all
listed with the town.
Right. Okay. So, Mr. Cruikshank, listings of short-term rental accommodation listed with the town, is that via the state's STRA register? Yeah. So, obviously, we don't have a register of everyone who's got their property listed on Airbnb, but obviously if you go to the Airbnb site, you can come up with properties in Victoria Park. But we do have a list of properties on the state's STRA register that started as the 1st of January this year. So, Mr. Cruikshank, is there anything else that you can say with regards to what we know about those properties?
That's correct, Madam Mayor, as you've described it. We haven't done a recent check of the STRA register, but as of 27th of November 2025, there were 202 registered STRA properties. So that includes all forms of short-term rental, whether it's hosted, that doesn't require planning approval, whether it's unhosted for less than 90 days, which doesn't require planning approval, or whether it's unhosted short-term rental for more than 90 days, which does need planning approval. So all forms of short-term rental, there were 202 in November 2025.
And can I just confirm, Mr Cruikshank, was that 222 in the town of Victoria Park or just the suburb of Victoria Park? I don't know how that register operates.
Yes, sorry, that's in the town of Victoria Park.
So that's all of our suburbs, not just Victoria Park. Does it have a breakdown by suburb, Mr Cruikshank?
You can search by that functionality from memory. We haven't done that or haven't recorded that here.
All right. It sounds like it might be something that's searchable publicly. That register might be available to members of the public to find out. But if you wanted us to provide that information, we could take that on notice, but the officers would then need to look into it and the answer wouldn't come until the agenda for our April meeting, which will be issued in a bit under 2 weeks' time. And then the answer to that question would be in the further consideration for this report. So is that information that you would like us to try to get for you in relation to Victoria Park, or you're content that that's where things sit?
I'm very content. Thank
All
you
right,
very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Next on the list, Sarah Bellamy. Again, if you could just state your name and your suburb for us, please.
Hi, Sarah Bellamy, and I live in Victoria Park. I also have an Airbnb in Vic Park, and I also have one in Lath Lane. Kirralie has addressed my question about the property we have in Vic Park. What's the plan with Lath Lane? I notice on the map that there is no Airbnb proposed properties for Lath Lane. Is that the way the town of Vic Park is proceeding, or they're not including the area in this planning policy?
Mr Cruikshank?
Madam Mayor, so the local planning policy that we've had in effect for a number of years, since I don't know the answer actually, it's a few years, let me see.
I think it's since about
2012.
2019.
I think it's 2012 actually, yeah, thank you. So I think since 2012 we have had a local planning policy in place. It didn't necessarily identify areas by a map, but it essentially identified 5 or so criteria and said that if you meet at least 2 of the criteria, then you will be favourably considered for short-term rental accommodation. It was found that that policy, when you apply those criteria, pretty much the bulk of the town of Victoria, of the properties in the town of Victoria Park would meet those criteria. So it was felt that probably the balance has gone a little bit too far in supporting short-term rental accommodation pretty much in most areas of the town, or allowing for it, whereas to try and balance the need with housing affordability and housing supply, it was felt that we needed to readjust that balance. So that's why the policy's now identified areas where there's probably a greater tourism and entertainment attraction focus, and using that criteria instead, we've identified initially there were 7 areas that we had proposed that short-term rental accommodation be confined to. The council in December of last year proposed to limit that to 3 areas of the town, and then what's been presented before council tonight is for it now to go to 4 areas, but Lath Lane is not included in any of those proposals, whether it was the 7, whether it was the 3, whether it was the 4. I guess just to elaborate further, I'm not sure of the circumstances of the member of the public, but if they have an existing approval for a premises in Lath Lane to use it as short-term rental accommodation, the policy acknowledges that and allows them to continue to use it as short-term rental accommodation. So even though if this policy was to be adopted, in essence, you would no longer be proposed any new short-term rental accommodation proposals in Lath Lane. If you have a pre-existing approval, then this policy acknowledges that and allows that to continue.
I believe that's for 10 years, isn't it?
So
On the
no,
policy?
the 10 years is a proposal for the new policy. That's how that would work, isn't it, Mr Cruikshank? Because that did come up in discussions about a time limitation period. But my understanding is that would be anyone who was applying under this policy, that would apply to them. Just get Mr Cruikshank to confirm.
You're correct again, Madam Mayor. I don't know the circumstances of the particular property that's being referred to by Ms Bellamy. I imagine it's probably the one of those which has no time limitation. It probably was granted an initial 12-month approval, and then I'd like to think you proved yourself as a good citizen, and then we've now issued you with a permanent ongoing approval.
Yes. The only thing I want to bring to the council's attention is obviously you've got the sporting precinct being where the waffle is, and you get AFL players coming to live nearby. You've got the local restaurants, and you've also got a public transport location very, very close. So I was just wondering what the justification was on not permitting the other side of Albany Highway, Shepparton Road being included in that catchment, really just as a general justification, and questioning why such small areas are being only considered.
So I think that the officer report certainly says that we went out to public consultation on this previously, and we re-advertised because the discussion that was being had was focusing on what was going to be in the best long-term interests of each of the different suburbs within the town. And so I think sentiment that was certainly heard through the discussion and came from the community's feedback. I'd say a good way to describe it is mixed, as in there were people who had very strong views about not wanting to see short-term accommodation in their own suburbs, and other people who did want it. And the people who didn't want it were very much concerned about two things: a loss of housing stock available for long-term renters who might contribute on a longer period of time to the community that we live in. And their other concern was around amenity. So sometimes short-term rental accommodations can have short-term visitors who create a bit of a disruption to a local residential community environment. And then I think on the other side of it, those who did want it cite vibrancy, the opportunity for people to come and stay, for people to come and visit their families, to come for events, etc., all of which add and contribute to our community as well. And equally, another side to the argument was property owners who want the right to be able to do what they wish with their properties and generate income from it. And also a thought by some of those people that whether we limit short-term rental accommodations to particular areas or we don't, won't make much difference to overall housing availability for renters and purchasers. So I guess we had a kind of difference of views between people, and some people appeared to be sort of on the border. They were a bit neutral about how they felt about it. And I think it's probably fair to say that some of the people who put in submissions suggested that they were concerned not against the whole idea, but against a proliferation, meaning that literally every other property might be a short-term rental accommodation. So I think that whenever we try to put these policies together, we're looking to try to create some sort of balance for what are the long-term objectives for the town of Victoria Park, as well as shorter-term objectives. And as Mr. Cruikshank said, initially it was said that there was like a large group of areas which effectively meant the whole town. And then there was some eligibility criteria was suggested to make it so that we wouldn't have short-term rental accommodation available for people which would be in an area where they simply couldn't walk to the kinds of services and facilities they might need. They would struggle to get public transport really easily. So then they would be coming into short-term rental accommodation and quite stranded. So the idea came about that there should be proximity to major public transport routes. And you do make a good point, Lathlane is well serviced by a public transport route. Admittedly, not all of Lathlane. Some parts of Lathlane are much closer to the train line than others. Others might be hard-pressed to argue that they're really close to good public transport. But as I say, the idea was to go back out and to seek more feedback. And we obviously have a schedule of submissions for the people who decided to put forward their thoughts. And my reading of it is that the public submissions are still a little bit of the same mind. They're still bringing the same arguments forward. And so in 2 weeks' time, council will need to debate how we see that moving forward, taking into account what we've heard from public submissions and questions such as yourselves coming along tonight. And maybe more people will come to the council meeting as well who've got views they'd like to share. So I'm not suggesting for one moment that changes and the creation of boundaries is arbitrary. It really is about trying to focus on those parts of the town where there's probably a seemingly better case for it. And if I gave an example for you as an owner of property in Vic Park and Lathlane, Lathlane has our lowest density zoning, so it's still R20, which means people have large blocks. They're not actually cutting those blocks up into 3 and 4, whereas Victoria Park as a suburb has the highest density rating, which is why it's currently been highly developed. And so there's a lot of density living, which means that often is usually better supported by lots of different types of infrastructure. But again, you point to something good, which is Victoria Park doesn't have the sporting precinct that Lathlane has. But then again, you might have owners of property in Lathlane who would say we'd rather all those people go and get a short-term accommodation over in Vic Park and not have it in Lathlane. But, you know, as I say, there are competing interests here and we are looking at what will strike a good balance. So I think if that sort of helps, we haven't made our decision yet. We always have to put something out that people can comment on. And clearly, this is one that has sparked some good submissions come back to us about the impact of a decision we might make. But it appears from what Mr. Cruikshank said, your approval, at least for Lathlane, is one that sets your property aside, and future people wanting to do short-term rental accommodation in an unhosted way in Lathlane properties might be something that isn't going to be available to them under this policy if council so decides. Yep.
And also the money that obviously people that are coming to the Airbnbs often put into the local economy also in fact influences the businesses. I know a lot of my guests staying at my properties I give them a list of local restaurants and they're very grateful for that and always give me fantastic feedback, as in Vic Park is such an amazing culturally diverse place. Didn't realise it had so many great opportunities, and I think it's a really great way to sell our suburb to families and to people who may want to come here in the future.
That sounds really great. Do you want to come work for us and promote Vic Park? Thank you for saying that. It is a lovely place, and you are right. Those many attractors are both the things that attract short-term visitors, but they're also the things that long-term residents love and value and cherish.
Exactly.
And so again, as I say, trying to sort of balance those things. I hope that's given you some helpful insight. Were there any other questions you had? While we obviously have the benefit of the staff here, although they will be here at the ordinary council meeting if that was something you decided you wanted to come back towards. And finally, because this is public participation time, would you like to make a statement about what you would like to see council do in 2 weeks' time when we debate this? Because this is your opportunity to try and persuade us what you think we should do.
Okay. Well, basically, I think the number of Airbnbs, 200, is quite minimal in percentages to the population and the amount of residential properties within the whole of the town of Vic Park. It's a very, very small percentage of homes. I believe that if the town's managing their approvals for Airbnbs appropriately, then there doesn't need to be the parameters around where your Airbnb is situated. I mean, it brings great spend and great amount of tourists to the area who are happy to spend here, happy to take up the area using our public transport, using our beautiful parks. I've had Airbnbs for 7 years and not had one complaint in that whole time. I've housed people going to medical appointments. I've housed people settling their children into boarding schools. I've housed people relocating back to Western Australia with pets. There's so many people staying in Airbnbs that are actually going to give to the community and not necessarily take from it. And I think for the small amount of properties that we actually have in the area, I don't really feel that there needs to be borders put around where they should be located because generally someone will look to stay near a family member, potentially on the same street, which I've had a few times, and they will try and situate themselves close to what they need, whether it be a hospital, whether it be John Hughes to buy a new car, which I've had someone come down to pick up their new car from Geraldton before. There's so many personal stories of people investing in the local area and that are coming to the local area to go to school, to send their kids to university. You know, there's so many things that they're actually taking part of in our local community that I feel it's unfair to put the borders around where they can actually live or stay for a short term.
All right, thank you. Thanks for that.
That's okay.
Appreciate your time and appreciate hearing from you. So we appreciate that. If there weren't any other questions, I note there are no other members of the public in the gallery. Ms. Owen, did you wish to make a statement, or you're content with what's been said so far?
I'm very good. Thank you.
All right, that's fine. What I will say is we'll be moving on out of public participation time now to the items on the agenda. If you wanted to stay and hear the questions that elected members may ask about this matter and the answers they get, you're welcome to do so, but noting you can also listen and hear those questions on the recording later at your own convenience. So much as we love to have people who'd like to stick around and listen to what we do, we know that it's not always a thrilling night out. So we understand if it wasn't something you want to stay around for, but it will be coming up pretty quickly on tonight's agenda. So I'll just give you that option.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your time. Thanks for listening.
You. Very welcome. All right, so I'll now bring public participation time to an end at 7:01 p.m. Next item on the agenda is presentations. There are none. Item 9, deputations. There are none. Oh, yes, that's right. We can actually bring her back in. I'll just... No, she'll hear that. Yep, that rings in the function room. I don't think she's missed anything with item 8 or 9, given there's no items. We'll move on to item 10, which is method of dealing with agenda business. So, elected members, we've received questions in relation to 11.1, which is Council Resolution Status Report March 2026, 11.2, outcomes from the annual meeting of electors 16 March 2026, and 12.1, adoption of revised local planning policy 31, unhosted short-term rental accommodation and residential buildings, following re-advertising. Are there any other items on the agenda that elected members wish to ask questions about? Because we'll add them to the list now. Or is there anyone who wants to take these items off if you're the one who asked the questions about them? You don't wish to pursue them further? No? So it looks like we're sticking with those 3. So we're going to go to 11.1 first, which is the Council Resolution Status Report. Councillor Cruz, I understand you've got some questions about this particular one.
For quite a few of these motions, the staff reply is that this action can be supported by administration. Just to confirm, if we want the administration to go ahead with that, do we need to put forward an amendment that says that it will be supported by administration?
Sorry, Councillor Cruz, we're referring to 11.1 Council Resolution Status Report. I had you down to ask a couple of questions about that, but you might not wish to pursue those.
I don't wish to pursue.
Okay, because I think you're talking about 11.2
Yes,
instead. All right, fair enough. Thank you for that. I had submitted a couple of questions in relation to this item, and so I might ask a couple of those questions. So the first one is this from the outstanding council resolutions attachment, which is 11.1.1, Council Resolution 282 of 2022. Council's resolution, I'd like to ask, what is the current status of the review of the traffic management in Carlisle that was originally to be reported to Council in April 2023 and currently has an updated end date of 30 April 2026? I'm going to go to the manager, it says here the manager of governance, but I think it's intended to be the chief operations officer, Ms. Labicus.
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. We have had a vacancy in our tech services manager position. So this has been slower than we'd anticipated. So we've got all of the specs and the job brief ready to go onto the vendor portal this week. Under the Local Government Act, it needs to be advertised for 2 weeks. We'll then evaluate it, and they'll be ready to go to do that study. So we will miss the April date. However, we're confident we'll get it by July.
All right, thank you. So if we're about to advertise and it has to be open for 2 weeks, does that mean by the time we reach the end of April, we'll likely be appointing someone to conduct the review? Would that be fair?
That would be fair, Mayor.
And when you say that you feel confident that this will be ready for July, how long is the exercise anticipated to take for this review? Ms. Libicus?
They'll have access to a lot of data, and they'll be able to do some modelling. So we would envisage that it would be a month to do the traffic study. They'll give us a draft, we'll then refine it and be hopefully ready to go in July.
Okay, and just out of curiosity, as part of the review, given that this has been deferred for some time due to the metro networks and the administration's view that we needed to let the traffic settle back down to a normal traffic flow pattern within Carlisle, will this review involve any things like traffic counting on streets, actually being out in the field, or is it only effectively desktop reviews of data and modelling? Ms. Libicus?
It is primarily desktop and modelling. If there's any gaps, then we can certainly put out field work and counters and the like. So the first pass is to take it from a desktop.
Okay, thank you. So I have another couple of questions that relate to 11.1.1. So the first one relates to consistency of how we're being reported. Have noted in my questions sent through that some resolutions now appear to be containing reasons for resolutions, but others don't. There's some references to amendments and other resolutions don't. And since neither amendments or procedural motions or things like that serve any purpose for a status report, can future status reports only include the wording of the resolution as passed by council to make this report a bit easier to read? I'm going to go the Manager of Governance and Risk for that, Mr. Douglas.
Yes, we can ensure this happens moving forward.
All right, thank you. And I do note that for all of the resolutions that are contained in 11.1.1, the final column entitled Days Overdue doesn't contain any information. Is there a reason for that, Mr. Douglas?
Yeah, so it appears that the reason for that is that the administration has been changing the due date to reflect the current anticipated response date rather than reflecting the due date as being, the amount days overdue. So ultimately, it would appear that the days overdue column wasn't accurately reflecting the number of days that a matter might be overdue. So we'll change that to correct the issue.
All right, good. That answers my next question about whether or not we can show accurately the number of days the action is overdue from resolution. So thank you. That can be done. That'd be great. Are there any other questions about 11.1? No? All right, we will move on to 11.2, which is outcomes from the annual meeting of electors for the 16th of March 2026. So I'm not going to come to you straight away, Councillor Cruiser, because I have written down here that we have a number of questions that came in from Councillor Biondi first. So we're going to go to Councillor Biondi for your questions in relation to 11.2, please.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. So I just have some questions in relation to motion 3 and motion 10. So I'll just run through them. Could the town please clarify how many CCTV cameras are currently in operation or currently in use, please?
Yes, we can certainly do that. Mr Gravett, Acting Chief Community Planner, I think, to answer the questions in relation to motion number 3.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Biondi, for the question. So the town doesn't have any actively monitored CCTV systems in operation. Moreover, static recording CCTV setups are within town facilities, which can then be accessed when a police report number is provided as per legislative and record keeping requirements. The town, through its CCTV partnership program, has funded 830 CCTV installations over 8 years for residents and local businesses, and the town has the most registered systems on the CAM map in WA out of any LGA, helping police to investigate incidences in those situations. And we've created a link there for more information regarding our CCTV partnership program, around some of our impact statements relating to that, and also some of the programs from our website for more information if needed.
Thank you. Councillor Biondi.
Thank you. Very comprehensive answer. Does the town have or deploy any mobile CCTV cameras on trailers? And if so, how many?
Mr Gravett.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The town does not own any mobile CCTV trailers. Currently, there are 2 temporary units on hire, one at the administration building and one at Elizabeth Bailey. And previously, this unit was at McCallum Park. Previously, the town has also hired a trailer for deployment at Macmillan Reserve and then also Carlisle Reserve in an effort to monitor antisocial behaviour, working in collaboration with WA Police.
Councillor Biondi.
Thank you. This question wasn't submitted, but just building on that answer, if I could, Madam Mayor. How effective do you find the use of mobile CCTV cameras in dealing with antisocial behaviour? Is it successful? Is it something we need more of, less of?
Mr Gravett.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. They're a little bit challenging in terms of the purpose and the effectiveness. So to have a good trailer needs to be high resolution, and in some instances it's more around potentially catching people after the act. So in terms of it being preventative and a deterrent, sometimes it's less effective in that way. The ones that we deployed down at Macmillan Precinct to look at addressing antisocial behaviour unfortunately proved to be less effective in some ways. People that were congregating down there actually enjoyed the lighting that it had, and so it was less effective in that situation. And similarly, we've heard different parts from different local governments in terms of their effectiveness and the timeliness as part of that as well. So being able to get the information, to get the source, and can it be accessed by police, and can they act on it in a timely way? So yeah, I think the jury's still out in terms of their degree of effectiveness, in terms of the effort and time to deploy, to monitor, to maintain, to store, to work with police in those different areas. So.
Yeah, I think might ask Mr Gravett, not sure if it's you or maybe someone from one of the other teams. We obviously deployed one down to McCallum Park in the lead up to trying to complete the McCallum Park active skate zone, because despite there being cyclone fencing by the construction operator around the site, people were jumping over that fencing and getting into the facility that we were trying to complete ahead of the completion date. And so clearly there's a risk there for the town if those people injure themselves. And so CCTV there, I think, was arguably you would say it was to deter a form of antisocial behaviour, but not the type of antisocial behaviour we were experiencing at Macmillan Precinct. And I think to some degree it might have had slightly better success rates down at McCallum Park from memory than it did at Macmillan Park. Let's just say at Macmillan Park there was some reports of some who were, shall we say, actors who might have been able to be on the stage with their performances in front of our CCTV cameras, whereas that was not, to the best of my knowledge, the experience with the mobile CCTV down at McCallum Park, which really was about deterring people from breaking into the site before it was completed. So I'm not sure if the town staff have any other reflections about that. Ms Labickas?
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. Interestingly enough, we moved the CCTV from McCullum to Elizabeth Bailey on Friday, and over the weekend there was vandalism of the public toilet with the service ducts all ripped out. So sometimes, and dependent on the type of antisocial behaviour, just the fact that the mobile CCTV are big and they're ugly, it's for those people who are kind of on the edge as to whether or not they're going to undertake antisocial behaviour, it can deter them for a period of time. Sometimes the fix becomes a bit white noise and people fail to see it, so sometimes it can just be that disruptor.
Not great news hearing about continued vandalism at Elizabeth Bailey Park, a brand new park, and particularly around the public toilet, which really should be like a privacy issue for people entering into the public toilets. So, yeah, well, time will tell, since it's only just been moved there, whether it has an impact. Further questions, Councillor Biondi?
Yeah, just building on that discussion and the answers. Do you think mobile CCTV could work for like a Mazzini Reserve type incident where there was continual behaviour and it was being documented? Is that something?
Ms Labickas?
I've seen it deployed in those kinds of situations to great effect. So it really does depend on the individuals who are undertaking that activity and whether they care about the consequences of being watched or not.
Thank you. Go back to the on-script questions now. Does the town have any commitments or a strategic roadmap for the implementation or rollout of CCTV?
Mr Gravett?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the town strategic roadmap focuses on replacement of town-owned CCTV security infrastructure within and surrounding our own facilities. The town CCTV partnership program and security incentive scheme is used to provide benefits within both private and public domains. Design of a CCTV system for installation in Q4 2026 in the Macmillan precinct has been created as a means of monitoring antisocial behaviour in this area, and this could be considered potentially as part of that funding application to the recently released state government CCTV funding opportunity. However, if we looked at that, that would delay delivery in that space in that way. But yeah, in short, it's more around because of the way that we approach CCTV, its deployment and its use, it's more focused on the internal and other infrastructure rather than public facing.
I'll just jump to the next question since you mentioned that. So Hannah Beasley recently announced funding for CCTV cameras for local government specifically, and is the town aware? Yes. But does the town intend on applying for this funding? Is that something we could look at?
Mr Gravett?
Yes, we're aware, and we'll certainly have a look at it to see what could be appropriate to a specific location from our conversations with WA Police or our outreach service provider, I24S, town staff, as well as other broader community feedback. So definitely an option to have a look at that one.
Thank you. A few more questions. Does the town have a crime and safety working group, or have they had one historically? Has that worked? Is it something that could be reinstated? I just wanted to get some understanding of that.
Mr Gravett?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Prior to my time before 2020, I believe there had been an attempt at a broader group. The degree of effectiveness and change instigated by that group was limited, I believe. And so due to the overarching complexity of the situation, the capacity on town resources, external resources to be involved in a variety of different situations, the town found it more effective to work with local groups, sort of neighbourhood groups and other individuals in that space. to help with their capacity, their understanding what was happening at a local level. And we do meet with police on a regular basis and discuss antisocial later issues and hotspots and key statistics and those sort of things. And we've also previously acted as a backbone to a collective impact approach to address antisocial behaviour associated with the McMillan precinct. So working in that broader collaborative approach where it might be more site-specific in those areas, which is more targeted, but also in keeping with that broader awareness and our capacity in those different areas. It's a big, broad topic, the old community safety, so difficult to be everywhere all the time.
Thank you. Just one more question on motion 3. And just for context, I'm asking these questions because I myself am just trying to get my head around all the different things that we do in this space. So I note on page 15 of the report, the officer's report, that the town's Safer Neighbourhoods Plan is scheduled for review around the next financial year. Is it possible? Sorry, I'm confusing myself as I'm reading my screen. Oh, my question was, is it possible to include a time frame for the review and delivery of investigation into SOC in the officer recommendation to ensure it can be investigated or reviewed in a timely manner?
Mr Gravett.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the current plan is due to be reviewed by June 2027. So Council will have an opportunity to provide feedback into the prioritisation of the various actions within the document, and as part of the initial engagement and when presented for feedback and advertising. In the shorter term, the town, we could also inquire during our catch-ups with WA Police regarding deployment of these type of what is it and how does it work and its infrastructure and what does it look like, and what does that mean in terms of approach, function, prioritisation of localities and those elements. But at this stage, in terms of us focusing on delivery of the remaining Safer Neighbourhoods Plan and then its review and that work in that space, and also, although I'm conscious I don't blend the streams in terms of these topics, but the work that this area is also doing around hopelessness and people rough sleeping and vulnerability, that also takes a fair bit of time in this area. So in terms of where we're investing our resources and effort to try and get the maximum impact in that space. But we can definitely have conversations, but in terms of that time frame, trying to integrate it as part of our broader review, and then Council can help us with prioritisation when we have a range of actions coming from there.
Understood. Thank you. Just a question on, I think it was motion 10. So that was about laneways, and in the officer response there was a mention of 18 laneways that have been identified or required to be upgraded. What is the plan going forward for those 18 laneways, and how will that be funded and upgraded?
Okay, I'm going to direct that to the Chief Operations Officer, Ms Lipicus.
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. Back in December 2021, a capital program was put together for the right-of-ways. And this, I think the total program, there were about 21 laneways. And what that suggested was that we would complete them over that 10-year period of 2 a year, except for the last, that was 3. And progress to date has been a lot slower. So right-of-way 33 was completed fully, right-of-way 46 was partially completed, but we're finishing that this year. And we're also putting in right-of-way 130 being completed this year, and we've put the budget up for 1 next year. So I guess we are currently behind in what we'd put up in 2021, and that's a combination of us not having designs ready to go, as well as capital prioritisation. So should Council want us to deliver the program quicker or differently, then we can work that through the capital program.
Thank you, that's all from me.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Biondi. Now, Councillor Cruiser, you start to ask a question about this item. We'll take two.
Thank you. In the officer comments on various of the motions, the wording is that the administration can take such and such an action. Would we be required to put through an amendment saying that the administration will in those cases in order to commit to action?
Go to Mr. Douglas as the Manager of Governance and Risk.
I guess it depends, just reflecting on it, have it handy what has been passed in the past in terms of the strategic plan and overall budget allocations to where the current situation sits at the moment. So if it is the case at this point in time that it hasn't been factored in, then it may be the case that we need a further budget allocation in order to do those. So in that sense, you'd need a council resolution.
For motion 2, this refers to improvements to public transport services and an extension of the free transit zone. Would the most appropriate way to act on this be to add this to our advocacy priorities, or could this be done at the officer level?
Mr. Douglas?
Can I take that question on notice and get back to
We can take
Councillor
that on
Cruiser?
notice. Yep.
With regards to motion 5, have there been any discussions with schools about implementing Safe School Streets trials?
Now I'm going to go to Mr. Gravitt, Acting Chief Community Planner.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. That's, I would say, unlikely because of the transition and the change we've had in that role. So in terms of in the integrated transport, it's a really hefty program and initiative, and working with street improvement around designs and trying to get ahead of the game. And the new person coming on board has been going quite well, but in terms of this type of initiative or program, less so. In terms of looking at where we invest our effort versus the maximum impact. And so some of these programs, they while they're probably more of a nice to do in some ways, and at this stage we're trying to do some larger strategic work. So short answer is unlikely. I can look to take that on notice and confirm, but I'd suggest in terms of the weight of everything we've been trying to get through the backlog and get ahead of the game, this is probably one of those ones that would have fallen away, yes.
With regard to motion 6, regarding the budget for the street meet and greet program, are staff able to give us any indication of how much the budget for this program would need to be raised in order to meet the community demand for the program?
Mr. Gravitt?
Good question. I think it's a little bit of how long's a piece of string in some ways in its success. One of the things I've asked the team to do is to have a look at and see, as we move forward, are we getting a lot of repeat streets? And in some ways that's not such a bad thing, but are we having a smaller number of people or streets who are using it on and on, where we're obviously trying to get a broader range in there. At the moment we're getting 205 households roughly for 15,000 because we're including the street closures. So it is difficult to say in terms of that broader range of how effective, how far do you want it to go? Are you looking at 500 households or 1,000 households? And so as a proportion on what we have there at the moment, that probably gives you an indication in terms of 15,000 for just over 200 households.
Do we know how many applications for the street meet and greet program were denied over the 2024-25 financial year?
Mr Gravett?
I'd need to take that one on notice for the 2024-25 financial year. Yeah.
And when it comes to motion 10, could we ask how many compliance actions have been undertaken in the last 12 months after complaints by homeowners about rental conditions, if any?
I don't think that's motion number 10. Motion number 10 is the standards of repair of commercial alleyways and laneways. You're referring to motion number 11, which was living conditions of students.
Thank you. Yes, motion number 11.
Mr Gravett?
Sorry, could you repeat the question, Councillor Crozer?
The National Health Construction Code and the health local laws prescribe minimum standards for matters like ventilation, lighting, water supply, and effluent disposal. Renters can make complaints about non-compliant properties, and officers can then undertake an investigation. I'm not talking about just student housing, but any renters in the town of Vic Park. How many complaints have been put in here over the last year?
So, Councillor Cruiser, I do have to say the questions do need to relate to the agenda. And so there is a question about whether that relates to this item, because this item is about the standard of living conditions experienced by students residing independently within the town. And so clearly students are one form of renters, but you're asking for renters generally. I'm not sure that this, for a start, is a question that we're going to be able to answer tonight anyway. So I'm not sure that this really relates. I think this is a step further away from the motion that was passed at the annual meeting of electors. Mr Gravett, is this something you have any statistics or data available to hand tonight?
No, Madam Mayor, no, we'd need to take that one on notice, yes.
All right, well, I'm not proposing to take the specific general question on notice. If you want to confine it to any renters who identify as students, if we have that detail, that could go on notice to go in the council report. But otherwise, I'd be encouraging you to submit a question about that generally to see what data we have available more broadly, like offline, outside of the ABF tonight. Councillor Crozer, what would you like to do?
Thank you. I would like to ask specifically whether we've received any complaints from students about the conditions of their student housing and whether those complaints have been investigated.
All right, we'll take that on notice, Mr Gravett. All right, anything further, Councillor Cruiser, about this item? All right, thank you. Are there any other questions about this item? Councillor Gordon-Manley.
Sorry, not about this item, but the other motions. I have some questions I'd like to raise. Great. Just to start with, I'll probably go back from this, but motion 10, Timothy Young, around the commercial alleyways and the laneways and their amenity. Did the previous laneway audit consider the overall amenity and conditions of laneways, such as cleanliness, visual amenity, waste, graffiti, lighting and safety, or was it focused primarily on road surface trafficability?
Ms Libicus.
The original audit was on road surface and trafficability, but we've recently done a separate audit that looks more broader in terms of safety, lighting, all of those things. So they're now coming together.
Exceptional. Mayor Vernon, can I ask when we will have that information available to us?
Ms Libicus, is that something that's scheduled to come to council or not necessarily?
Not that I'm aware of. Yeah.
So at this stage, Councillor Gordon-Manley, it sounds like it's not going to be information that would be the subject of a report to council. So if that's something that you would wish to pursue, that you want to see that information provided, is that information, Ms Libicus, that could be provided to elected members outside the council meeting cycle, such as through the elected members portal or a concept forum presentation or something of that nature?
Yes, Mayor Vernon, we certainly can.
Councillor Gordon-Manley?
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. That's exceptional. That will probably answer my secondary question, which was going to be about how often we have taken compliance action on commercial laneways in the previous 12 months.
I'm thinking that I'm trying to think who would be doing that work. Wouldn't that be your department, Mr. Cruikshank? A planning matter for compliance action for use of commercial laneways. Although having said that, I'm not sure that too many of our laneways are exclusively commercial. There's a lot of laneways that have got residential and commercial on them. So I'm trying to work out who would take compliance action for the use of a laneway. Would that be a planning matter or something else?
I think we might all chip in, Madam Mayor, but I guess it depends upon what the compliance matter is. If it's, I know the health team in the past has dealt with issues on Iceworks Lane to deal with rubbish and waste and odour smells. I guess it might depend upon it's the actual standard of the surface on the right-of-way, which is probably more an engineering matter. Whether it's the noise of vehicles going down the laneway. I guess it, again, probably depends upon what the particular compliance matter is that we're being asked to respond to.
Yep. Councillor Gordon-Manley, is there something further you can add to that? Because I think to pick up Mr. Cruikshank's point, clearly it would be members of the operations team who would go out as the graffiti response team if there's graffiti in a laneway. Non-compliance by, rangers, non-compliance by the tenants facing into a laneway, particularly if they're commercial, might engage our rangers team as well as our compliance and building health and those types of officers. So they basically are across most of the chief's portfolios. So unless you're able to be more specific about that, it might be pretty difficult to draw together that information.
No, I think I will, thank you, Mayor Vernon. I think I'll send an email to clarify in relation to Timothy Young's request and seek some items that may specifically address what he was seeking there. The final question I had, if I can move on, is just around the motion on meets and greets. And of course, I've lost my place, so bear with me for a second. In regarding to the applications, I understand that applications would have ceased for this once the funding was, I guess, exhausted. To get an adequate understanding of maybe the true demand of this process and whether or not we're meeting the community's expectations or the community's hopes for this street engagement. Is there any interest or has been any investigation into understanding the true scope of that demand? Thank you.
Mr. Gravett.
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. It's a bit of a mix of how successfully we promote it. What's happening in the community is another aspect within there. So, no, I don't think we've looked to gauge demand by each year when we've had a budget and the number of people or the uptake and the budget used. And so most years it's been fully expended. This year it's been expended quicker than previous years, I'd say, in terms of being December. But that's also because we're factoring in there now the transport, the road closure aspects as well. So we used to have that previously. That was removed to try and make it more agile and go further. But now adding that back in there adds more safety and protection for the larger ones. So it's, and there's other elements that we can, in terms of how much we promote and the level of uptake there. So it's difficult to quantify because like a lot of things, unless it's really important to you, you can see the information a whole number of times and still not really get the message through. So, it's marketing goes so far, but difficult to quantify.
And probably the final question I have, Mayor Vernon, is on the subject as well. Another thing that's difficult to quantify, but in terms of engaging residents and seeing maybe how large an impact this budget allocation has, do we have any tracking or do we have any substantial reviews or reports on that?
Mr. Gravett.
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. Yes, we do, in as much as so for these programs the last couple of years on our social impact statements on the website. So we have we undertake a review in terms of the how much, how well is anyone better off relationship there. And so we get feedback from those people who have hosted a gathering. We look at that sort of over a period of time. It's fair to say when we're looking at these aspects about what is directly attributed to that fund and that benefit and that gain within there versus the contribution. And I think it's one of those areas that would do well to have more of a longitudinal study, but in terms of its impact and time and resourcing to do that as well. So things like neighbours knowing each other, and has that built over time? Do they feel more connected? Are they reducing social isolation? So there's definitely anecdotal. It's one of those things we're looking at going back to previous years and engaging with those participants there and seeing if things have changed and evolved in that space. But at this stage, no, we haven't invested in that, but we do have a whole range of social impact statements on our website on a whole range of other aspects, which this one's included as part of our Safer Neighbourhoods progress of our plan within there as well. So, but happy to, I think we might have provided some of the links to some of that went out, but happy to also send that back through if need be to help spotlight that a bit more.
Anything further, Councillor Gordon-Manley?
Thank you for your time, Mayor Vernon.
It's all right. I've got a couple of questions about this. It probably picks up some of the things that have been discussed. So starting with motion 6 about the street meet and greet program, can you let us know how much has been the annual budget for this program over the last 5 years? Has it remained at the 15,000 or has it grown to 15,000, Mr. Gravett?
I'd need to take that one on notice, Mayor Vernon. I think we've upped and down it in different ways to adapt the program and its use, and combining that with other security incentive schemes and other things. So, yep.
All right, if we can take that on notice, thank you. That would be helpful. My next question is, given you've noted that there's been an increase in the uptake in the current year such that the budget is now fully expended, has that come about as a result of an increase in the number of people applying for the grant, or that the individual applications for grant funding have been for more money than previously? Or is that not information that you have to hand, Mr. Gravett?
Again, I think to do that justice, Madam Mayor, I'd prefer to take that on notice, please.
All right, thank you. In my experience on council, the CCTV partnership program experienced a similar cyclic outcome over a number of years where it was highly subscribed in probably the first 5 years it was introduced, and would regularly be exhausted before 6 months of the financial year had expired, leaving many people having to wait until the following financial year to be able to put in their systems and apply for their grant funding. And then I recall a time when the administration recommended that we significantly increase the amount of that funding, and we did so, and from then on numbers of applications began to drop off such that the program was no longer fully expended, and it actually came to the point where the program was under-expended by the time we reached the end of the financial year, which I understand resulted in a, shall we say, an adjustment downwards of the overall amount. Mr. Gravett, you might remember this as something elected members were often concerned about in budget preparation time, that we were perhaps putting a lower cap on the CCTV partnership program. Is there an opportunity for the street meet and greet program to maybe expand in a small way as a trial for 26-27, noting that the amount of money to be allocated for that program will have to be locked in fairly soon as part of the budget discussions, to just test the waters to see what a modest increase would mean for availability of the program going forward? Is that something that could be considered? And I'm probably thinking potentially up to a $5,000 increase of a $15,000 budget. That's increasing it by a third. Mr Gravett, thoughts on that?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, that sounds fair and reasonable. You were tying in some of the feedback relating to the CCTV program. So are you suggesting potentially that we take $5,000 from the CCTV program and put it? No? Okay, shaking the head.
No, I wasn't wanting to suggest where you might find the money. If the administration were of the view that the CCTV partnership program's annual funding has continued to be under-expended, then you might make the case to us that the money could come from that pot, noting, of course, what our commitments to our community are for safety and safety-related programs have to be considered over here, and what we might do for, I guess, associated community development placemaking as well as community safety might sit separately over here with the street meet and greet, but noting that they are related to us basically improving the safety of our places. I was more meaning, given that we have trialled this before with the CCTV partnership program to expand the budget by a modest amount to see if that would be taken up, and it was, and then a further expansion came and then it appeared to tap out. And then from then on there appears to have been some of a decline, which might actually be explained by the fact that more and more households have the CCTV and are no longer looking to seek that grant funding, and it's borne out by the fact that you've told us already tonight we already have the greatest coverage of any local government area under the WA Police system. So I'm wondering if, given that budget workshopping is going on now and we're only probably a couple of months away from having a final budget, if there is capacity, for example, to be pitching this program to be increased by, say, that third, to see if it will make any difference for the coming year, and then we measure how that goes going forward. Because I think we need to be clear if we need to ask you questions about how to do this, and this is the chance for us to do that if we're going to do something positive in 2 weeks' time around this. Mr Gravett?
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. Yes, I like the connection and the way you explain the CCTV program. That makes sense. I think it's definitely feasible, and looking at my colleague, Mr Ald over there, he sort of holds the purse strings to a degree, but we'll also be bringing that to council as part of the workshop in a week and a half. So we're just over a week now, I believe. So definitely take that on board, and I think it's a sound idea.
All right, thank you, because I just want to make clear for the purposes of elected members, if we're passing a resolution in 2 weeks' time about this particular motion to increase the budget, that will then mean that there will be no further discussion about that at a budget workshop about whether the cap should be increased or not, because a resolution of council to do so in 2 weeks' time will mean that goes in the budget. Hence the reason for wanting to know if this is something we can do without stepping on too many toes or crushing too many other programs' dreams of extension of their budgets. All right, thank you. Going back to motion number 3 with regards to the CCTV and picking up on some of the answers that were given around particularly the move from the mobile CCTV out of McMillan Park into Elizabeth Bailey Park. Couple of questions for Ms Lobickers. Do you have any idea of what the cost of a mobile CCTV camera unit is, and how hard are they to procure? Like, are they something that you can simply go out and buy one, or do they have to be custom made, that sort of thing? Ms Lobickers? Mr Gravett, you know? If you know, please do tell.
Well, ballpark, Madam Mayor. We did, from our colleagues in the city of South Perth, they have some designs. I think from memory it was about $40,000, give or take. Sort of a few thousand in around there, so 40 or 50 maybe. Bit of inflation, a bit of time and where the situation. So I can also take that on notice and get feedback in terms of where they are, but I think that's probably the ballpark-ish.
That would be very helpful if we could take that on notice as to the costing for one. And I guess my question for either Mr Gravett or Ms Lobickers, do these mobile CCTV cameras come with options for floodlighting like the one that's sitting out the back in the administration area at the moment? And is there options for them to be solar powered and things like that? I'm seeing nodding, saying yes.
I think as big as the budget is, Mayor, you can get what you want. If you want flashing lights and music, you can get that too.
Well, my next question was going to be, do they come with a disco ball and do they play music at night time? Because we could do quite a lot with that, I think, in certain locations. But no, it was more about what this might cost. So then my next question is for either Ms Libicus or Mr Gravett. Can you see a case for the town of Victoria Park to acquire one or more such units to be deployed in locations that we might need them, in preference to repeated long-term versus short-term need to hire such units for different things? Either of you to answer. Don't mind who goes first.
I would say absolutely, Mayor. So everything from antisocial behaviour to illegal dumping hotspots. There's a lot of use cases that we're struggling with at the moment.
Okay, Mr Gravett, your thoughts from community's perspective?
Look, I'd be open to exploring the potentiality and see how it goes and improving, sort of looking at it as a test and pilot. And we haven't got much to lose in terms of trying to look at its effectiveness over time and if it's making an impact. So happy to explore that.
All right, thank you. Could we take that part on notice then, given that Ms Libicus has said it has uses, and Mr Gravett, you say you'd be happy to look at exploring it, but I'm looking at the fact that in 2 weeks' time, we're coming back to deal with these particular notices of motion. And I will say that notice of motion number 3 is possibly directed towards something a little different, but Councillor Biondi's questions have probably expanded that, as in how exactly that CCTV could or would work. So it'd be useful to have some idea, even if it's only a brief summary, of the advantages and the disadvantages of such equipment, because again, Council is trying to do its budget workshops at the moment, so it'd be useful to understand whether that's a feasible option for us to be considering at this particular point in time. So thank you for that. And my final question relates to Elizabeth Bailey Park. Given that the motion is about making sure that we have CCTV that meets the State Operations Command Centre's requirements for a certain level of compliance of cameras, do either of you know whether Elizabeth Bailey Park might qualify for a permanent CCTV pole of some description within this new state government funding program that I understand applications close in May for? Anybody? Mr Gravett?
Happy to take that one, Madam Mayor. It would be part of an investigation of where we would then perhaps put the receiver. So because we've got static systems, so if it's not monitored, could we have an arrangement with Bailey House, for example? So it'd be part of investigations to see whether it was fit for purpose and the practicalities of the install and how far do you what coverage, is it trying to cover the whole park, certain areas, being mindful of playground areas and children? And so there's a little bit to unpack in terms of the design. Is it Wi-Fi? Is it linked to electrical supply? Solar has its issues, Wi-Fi. So there's a few things to design, but it's not to say, from what we've heard tonight and ongoing in the last sort of few months, Elizabeth Bailey being a jewel in the crown of the town, some of the challenges we've been having. So it definitely is worth investigating to see if it's feasible and try and link into this state government funding.
All right, thank you. Because going back to the notice of motion from the community, I note that it asked for examine and advise the cost impact on rates to progressively introduce, it's called the State Operation Command Centre Police Network compatible cameras, what we call the automatic number plate recognition cameras. But the officer's answer to that is we already have that within the town. But then the second part to the motion goes on to say liaise with counterparts in other shires to examine suitable solutions. I'm not quite sure what that relates to, unless you can tell me, Mr Gravett, what you think it relates to, because the third part of that motion from the community was decides in principle after the investigation phase to proceed with a single camera 1-year trial, which I didn't understand, but then the member of the public who put it forward didn't know the answer you were going to provide as administration, that we already have these automatic number plate recognition cameras within the town, but they could be looking at bigger, broader things which tend to be pointed to, I guess, from your answer. So is there something there, reading from the officer's comment, that you actually think we need to do with regards to the automated number plate recognition cameras / high resolution security type cameras in busy locations? Mr. Gravett?
I don't think this is a quick fix, Madam Mayor. Like, it needs a little bit more investigation of those things I mentioned before. So when we worked with WA Police and Western Power to install the ANPRs, the automatic number plate recognition cameras, it took a lot of working out in terms of those whole range of logistics. So I think for us, it's still understanding what is the State Operation Command Centre, its purpose, how does it function, what's in the town, what's not in the town. And as I outlined before, at the moment, the town has had the approach of using the CCTV partnership program is to help with the spread of surveillance is not the right word, but I guess that broader support there. So it's exploring what and how. What does it mean, like the high-res security? What does that actually mean? What's the intent there, and how do we link into that? So Elizabeth Bailey may give us some insights, and also some of the work we've been doing around Macmillan. But depending on what that means and over time, I think that's the part that we're asking for a little bit of space to understand what are the implications and what resourcing, what are those whole of life costs that we don't want to jump into something and then all of a sudden, it's a lot more than what we plan to get into.
All right, thank you. That was all my questions. Councillor Biondi?
Thank you. My question will be quick and it can be taken on notice. I just want to know what the higher cost is. Mayor Vernon asked about the purchase cost, but I'd also just like, for context, the higher cost of these mobile CCTV cameras to understand the financial implications of that.
I don't know if we've got that available at this stage. Might be something we need to take offline.
We've got an invoice, so it's about $5,000 per unit per month.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions about this item? Deputy Mayor Miles.
So I wanted to follow on from some of the questions that you were asking, Mr. Gravett, about the street meet and greet budget. So this came up at it was in a report in the ABF in March, and so I've got a you said in your question that we'd had budgets over the years, and we'd had, I think the traffic management plans were separate and they were included in certain years. And so I've got here that in 2024, 2025, we had a $15,000 budget. We spent $10,377 on parties, street meet and greets, and then $4,377 on traffic management plans. And then I've got a comment here that the year before the budget was $13,000. Would it be possible to find out for those previous years, what the budget was and whether the what the traffic management costs were and whether they came out of that budget? So obviously for this year it did, but whether it came out of that budget or it was a separate budget, and what we were spending. So what we were spending on street meet and greets and what we were spending on the traffic management part for, I guess, the last amount of years is easy to find. Thank you.
We can take that on notice with the other part that was taken on notice of my question. Anything further? No. Any other questions on this item? No. All right, so we're now about to move on to 12.1, so I'll need to ask Councillor Biondi to leave the room, please. Having declared financial interest in it, we'll buzz you back in when we're ready. All right, so this is the adoption of revised local planning policy 31, unhosted short-term rental accommodation and residential buildings following re-advertising. Now, can confirm Councillor Biondi has left the room. Councillor Minson, you've got some questions about this item?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Vennon. A few questions. I sent through with notice. A principal intent of the introduction of a 10-year approval period was to ensure management control is maintained with the town perpetually, particularly over the number and distribution of STRA properties. So without a time limit, the concern was a ratcheting mechanism would be at play with permanent approval for properties to be used as short-term rentals and no limit on any future properties applying. So my question is, what options would the town have to control the future total number of STRA properties within an area with the proposed LPP? And when I say proposed LPP, I mean the latest town recommended LPP, so without time limitations.
Mr Cruikshank.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Under the proposed LPP contained at attachment 1 and recommended for adoption, there are no provisions that would limit the total number of STRA properties within one of the 4 preferred areas. Each development application would be considered on its own merits without consideration to the total number of STRA properties in the area. That approach is considered reasonable in the context that only around 1.2% of the total residential dwellings across the town are currently registered for STRA, and it is highly unlikely that the number of properties within an area used for STRA rather than longer term or permanent accommodation would significantly increase to a point where it would be necessary or reasonable to limit the number of or approval period for STRA properties so as to preserve or maintain the character of an area. It's not clear whether the original intent of imposing a maximum 10-year time period was to set an absolute maximum time period, or whether it would be open for an applicant to seek an extension beyond the 10-year time period. If the former, a blanket 10-year approval period, would not be appropriate in circumstances where the property could be well managed and amenity impacts are minimal and there's been a low uptake of the number of STRA properties in an area. If it's the latter, this would be difficult to administer without determining a figure specifying the total number or percentage of properties in an area permitted to be used for STRA, which additionally would be somewhat arbitrary.
Thank you. So just following on from that, I guess I can't speak for the intent of council, but as the mover of the amendment, the intent for me was the latter, that properties could reapply for extensions, so it wouldn't be an absolute tenure. But on that point, so can the administration explain, I guess that it was labelled arbitrary, the town or council having a strategic position on the number of STRA properties within the town?
Mr Cruikshank.
Madam Mayor, I think the reference to arbitrary was just what's the right figure, what's the right balance, and just would need to be some, I suppose, facts or evidence or some basis to agree upon what the actual figure would be, not just we'd have to have some basis to it.
Thank you. So does the town have a position on what would be an ideal number of STRA properties operating within the town?
Mr Cruikshank.
Madam Mayor, no, we don't think that the appropriate, control is a percentage or a number of properties in the town. I guess we've outlined that we've limited the number of properties now, through council modifications. We're now proposing that there be 4 areas. We've indicated that there's a low percentage of properties already used as STRA, and that's essentially where, under the current policy regime, you can have STRAs almost anywhere in the town. So we consider that if we're to limit it now to 4 areas of the town, we don't think there's going to be a significant uptake to the extent that the balance between permanently occupied properties and STRA properties is going to be out of whack. We think that even a modest increase in the number of STRA properties really isn't going to probably impact upon the character of these areas that we're talking about to any significant extent. And I think, as we've outlined in the response to this question, and it was outlined in December 2025, we think the appropriate course of action is, rather than put a figure in place, is to basically just commit to regular reviews of the policy and or if when an issue or needs arise. So if it is identified that we are seeing an increased number of applications and it's considered that is impacting on the character of the area, then review the policy. I think that's the better approach than putting a figure in place.
Thank you. Just on, I guess, the commentary around that 1.2%, which is currently registered STRA properties, noting that's, I guess they all have permanent approvals and that's not all STRA properties, but the commentary that that's a low number, just I guess understanding that why the town views that to be a low number, I guess considering that, the vacancy rate in Perth is around 1% and a balanced rental market is considered around 2.5%.
Mr. Cruikshank?
Madam Mayor, I don't think there's any signs to it. I just consider, I think any reasonable person would say 1% or 2% is a low number of 100%. So I think it's as simple as that, just saying it's a very low number on the overall context. What does, I think in the previous report we said there was that 18,000 to refer to it, is it 16,000, 18,000 dwellings in the town? So we're talking 200 of the, just get my figures right. No, I can't see it now that I'm looking for it, but I guess it's the point is 200 dwellings being used for STRA out of, is it 16,000, 17,000, I should know this, is a low number.
Thank you. Within the report, there's the Walga guideline on unhosted short-term rental accommodation, and the cutout that lists some general scenarios where time periods are considered appropriate. The first is when an area is undergoing a period of transition. So I guess considering the recent adoption of our new local planning scheme and the new Albany Highway Precinct Structure Plan and the target to double the town's population by 2050, would the administration describe the town as being in a period of transition?
Mr. Cruikshank?
The relevant Walga statement that's been referred to, Madam Mayor, I don't think it's necessarily specific to the use of time limitations for STRAs. It's talking about as a general principle where you look at limiting a time period. It's in a couple of circumstances. One is where an area is undergoing a period of transition. We have used that clause in putting temporary approvals in place for areas and transitions such as Burswood Station East, where it's anticipated that goes from an industrial area to a mixed-use development area. Similarly, along Burswood Road in the Causeway Precinct, we've similarly approved applications for things such as, I guess, some car yards, motor vehicle service repair where it's undergoing transition. So there's clearly a very obvious change from a major land use to a different land use that's supported by a planning framework. So I think, yes, probably some of the residential areas of the town are undergoing some change, and transition, but probably not in the extent contemplated here. I'd see that the reference to applying this an area undergoing transition to be where there's a wholesale change in the character of that area.
Thank you. Going back to the questions I submitted with notice, so further, I guess, to those previous questions, what options would be available to the council and town in the future, so potentially a future iteration of council that might have a different perspective? So what options would be available to them to change the areas within the proposed local planning policy, and also to effect a transition of STRAs away, so hypothetically from a previously listed area to a new area?
Mr Cruikshank.
Madam Mayor, it's open to the council in the future to change the number of areas or the location through reviewing the policy on a regular basis, or if and when the need arises. The officer's view is that it is a better approach to be reviewing the preferred areas and the policy regularly, or if an issue arises, rather than imposing a 10-year limitation, assuming that issues will arise.
Thank you. So I guess, yeah, just on that, so in this, I guess it's a hypothetical event, when the policy is reviewed like you're proposing, and a change is made, say an area is removed and a new one is put up because that was, had aligned with the strategic policy at the time, or for whatever reason, would there be a mechanism, I guess, to transition STRAs that were approved in this area to drop a number, and for STRAs in the new area to be naturally increased? So I guess I'm asking, without a time limit approval, is there ability for the town to make those types of strategic changes?
Mr Cruikshank.
Madam Mayor, I think it would probably only reasonably follow in the same way that the draft policy you have before you allows, is to acknowledge that if a premises already has an approval based upon the rules of the time that was approved, then it should continue to be able to act on that approval. And I don't think it would be reasonable to change the policy at a future time and all of a sudden say to an applicant, well, you did have an approval under the rules of that time, the rules have changed and you no longer have that approval. So I think we should be acknowledging that, again, the rules of the day allowed something to occur, and that should be honoured into the future.
Yeah, and I guess follow up on that, if there were to be a 10-year approval period, then you could affect that type of change just described.
Mr Cruikshank.
Madam Mayor, yes, that if there was to be a 10-year limitation in place, that could be a mechanism to do that.
Thank you. I guess, so yeah, another question that was sent on notice. What options would be available to the council and town in the future to decrease the number of STRA properties with approval with the proposed local planning policy?
Mr Cruikshank.
There are no Madam Mayor, there are no provisions in the proposed LPP that would decrease the number of approved STRA properties. If a property is approved for STRA beyond its initial 12-month period, then it could be used permanently for such a purpose. A tool available outside the planning framework that could reduce the number of STRA properties would be the application of a differential rate for STRA properties.
Thank you. Following question, would a reapplication for a STRA approval attract a fee?
Mr Cruikshank.
Madam Mayor, yes, the current fee is $147.
Thank you. How does the cost of that fee compare to an estimated cost of reassessment?
Mr Cruikshank.
Madam Mayor, it is estimated that the processing of an amended application, which would include community consultation, would take approximately 4 to 5 hours. it is estimated the cost of assessing an amended application equates to approximately twice the fee payment received.
Thank you. I guess just for context, is that typical cost recovery for a fee associated with planning work?
Mr Cruikshank?
Madam Mayor, the planning fees that are charged are prescribed by legislation, and they're maximum fees, and they haven't been reviewed for at least 10 years. So it's often the case that the fees that apply at the moment do not reflect cost recovery.
Thank you. Another question. Will the 10-year approval period apply retrospectively to approved STRA properties?
Mr Cruikshank?
No. Where a property has a current approval without a time limitation, the property can be indefinitely used for STRA. A 10-year approval period, if adopted, would only apply as a condition of approval to applications determined after the adoption of the revised policy.
Thank you. So, given that, will all applicants for STRA approval know up front that their approval is limited to a 10-year period?
Mr Cruikshank?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If a 10-year approval period is adopted by Council, then applicants would become aware of the limitation through a condition of their development approval, which obviously would occur prior to them commencing the use.
Thank you. So one of the principal arguments, I guess, that's been put forward by the town and also through some of that the community feedback is, I guess, the unfairness of having a 10-year approval if, say, investment was undertaken at a residential property, for it to operate as a short-term rental. So I guess considering that it won't apply retrospectively, and any future person looking into getting a development approval for a STRA would know up front that it was conditional and 10-year approval. Does that situation, I guess, justify, a counter argument to that position that that it isn't unjust?
Mr Cruikshank?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think the principal response from myself is that the basis for a 10-year approval really just doesn't seem to stack up when you look at the proportion of properties in the town, and we don't consider there's going to be a huge uptake to a point that the character of an area changes to warrant the imposition of a 10-year approval in the first place. So while I understand the question, and in that context it seems reasonable, there's other drivers as to why the 10-year approval period is not preferred by the officers.
Thank you. And final question on that I sent through notices, I guess, regarding the areas. Is it possible to receive a comment, and preferably with data, on a comparison of current residential density and housing form within the residential areas between the Albany Highway Victoria Park area and the Albany Highway East Victoria Park area?
Mr Cruikshank?
Madam Mayor, yes it is. We can take that on notice, but maybe if Councillor Minson could clarify a little bit more as to what in particular he may be seeking. I just found it was unclear as to maybe what in particular is being sought.
Councillor Minson?
No problem. I guess we've had some commentary about it being more suitable potentially for STRA to occur in higher density areas of the town, potentially, town areas that are, say, more unit style or apartment style, as opposed to, I guess, detached or single dwellings with backyards and large properties. Just as obviously, there's always exceptions to that rule, but just on balance, that one seems to would prefer a short-term rental type of outcome, and the other potentially more suited for a long-term resident to live in. So I guess trying to maximise the utility of our housing stock by trying to align, where these short-term rental applications can be to be more aligned with, potentially smaller units, which, would have a higher percentage utilisation as a short-term rental than a big property with a yard, which you wouldn't really utilise all that necessarily as a short-term rental. So trying to get a feel between the Victoria Park area, which is currently listed within the local planning policy in the East Victoria Park area, which has been proposed to be added back in. So a comparison between those two areas, I guess to boil it down to something useful, I was thinking density, or percentage, I guess, housing form. I'm not sure if that's the right term to describe units and apartments as opposed to standalone houses.
We're taking that one on notice. Mr Cruikshank, is that deal?
Yes, taking it on notice, and
Now that you
thanks for the elaboration
understand. Yep.
and we'll do our best to respond to that. Yep.
Okay. Anything further, Councillor Minson?
That's
No?
it, thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions on 12.1? Deputy Mayor Miles.
Yeah, I was also curious about the town's position that 1.2% was considered low. Does the town know what the rental vacancy rate is, or is that not information that we would have?
Mr Cruikshank or Mr Old? Mr Old, is that you? I feel like you were sitting there silent all evening. You needed a question, I could just tell.
Thank you, Mayor. Was that a wake-up Jeff call?
If you like it to be, yes.
I'll take that on notice. However, I suspect we just won't know with any clarity because there may be privately held rentals, there may be real estate agents or some other mechanism, but we'll see what we can find. And if we got information that we are reasonably confident it's solid, we'll provide it, but I suspect it's not going to be known.
Okay,
Anything further?
so if I was just on the Googles and it was some websites were estimating that the rental vacancy rate was in Vic Park was between like 1.13 and 1.15%. So with the context of that, does the town still consider the fact we potentially have more short-term rental accommodation than vacant rentals for people to live in the town? Would you still consider 1.2% to be low if it's more than the total amount of rentals available in the market at the moment?
Mr Old?
I'll take this one on notice. I can't provide a response right now.
All right, well, we'll have to take that on notice.
Sure, and then I had another question. Given that 1% was considered a small number out of 100, looking at the STRA numbers that were provided in the December 2025 meeting, so we had 172 short-term rentals in March 2025. 27th of November, we had 202, which is an increase of almost 20% in 7 months, which is quite a big number. Assumably, it's not still increasing at 20%, but would it be possible to actually find out what the registered STRA properties are as of March or April 2026 and what the increase has been, please?
Probably shouldn't say this, Deputy Mayor Miles, but I actually just tried to do that on the state government short-term rental accommodation register site. Told me I had to create an account, and I did create an account, and it now tells me the only things I can do are to register my short-term rental accommodation, which wasn't what I wanted. So I'm assuming that the town has access to some kind of corporate account where this information can be got, because I clearly am not going to be able to do it. Mr Cruikshank, is it possible for us to get up-to-date figures from the STRA register?
Yes, there's 236 as of today.
Okay, so that's up from 222, did you say earlier in your 202, your previous answer? So that's a bump up. Yep. So that's since November last year, is that right? Because you said 202 as of November last year. All right. Is there any part of your question, Deputy Mayor Miles, that hasn't now been answered by Mr Cruikshank's information? No?
That's good then.
Is there anything further that you want to ask about this item? No. Are there any other questions about this particular item? In that case, I'll ask a couple of questions with regards to it. So, noting the officer's position and Mr Cruikshank's answers about the relative low percentage of STRA properties as registered by comparison to the number of potentially rentable properties within the town, meaning all rateable properties are potentially rentable as short-term rental accommodation, assuming they get the relevant approval. What would happen if, given this is the first year of there being a state-based register and many property owners are still in the process of finding out about their responsibilities and they're busy registering within the town, that we find by the time we reach 31 December 2026, there's an explosion of registered properties on the state-based register, such that there's no longer approximately 1% of properties registered, but it's higher than that. Does that change the administration's view about the need to be more restrictive with LPP 31, or does it not make any difference really to you at all? Say if it bumped up to 5% or, heaven forbid, 10% or 20%, would that be starting to make a difference, Mr Cruikshank?
Madam Mayor, it probably would get to a, I don't know what the magic number is, but it probably would get to a point where we would think that, yeah, it probably has got beyond where we would have thought things would have landed. And obviously, I guess we can hear tonight that the council has it would seem that the council has a view that even some modest increase might not be appropriate. That's maybe the sentiment I'm gathering. So I think taking that into account, we'd probably have to keep that in the back of our mind. And if we do see a significant increase in the number of applications, we'd probably just have to make a call ourselves to say, well, this is what we thought was going to happen, but this is what actually has happened, and we know council's interest in this item, so we might just off our own bat decide to bring an item back to council to revisit it.
Okay, so the part I'm struggling to understand is we have a number of people in the town who already have pre-existing approvals before there was any registration process, and those people's approval doesn't lapse, so they've got it for as long as they want it. Mm-hmm. And then we're now proposing a new policy that will materially reduce the areas within the town where you can have a STRA, and officer's recommendation is once they get that approval under this policy, it won't have any limitation on it, so it won't be for 10 years or 5 years and then you have to reapply. It'll be once you've passed the probationary period, that's it, you've got it. Is it then possible for this council or another council in the future to say, we're now worried about the number of such properties and we want to curtail this even further? Do we even have any power to do that, noting that we then wouldn't, it would appear, be able to impact on the rights of those who got their approval under this policy or indeed under what existed before, but we would be curtailing the future rights of people to expand into the space? So am I right that we wouldn't actually be able to keep paring this policy back, or are you of the view that we could do, but the only people who'd be impacted by it would be anybody wanting to do it going forward, not anyone who'd managed to get in under either the old system or this new policy it's only going to impact people in the future. Mr. Cruikshank?
Yes, I would say, as I maybe indicated before, those people who have an existing approval have the benefit of that approval and can continue to operate. It would only be those who apply for approval under a different policy regime that would be caught up by any revised policy. Yeah, I guess I'd probably just make the point as well that generally, of the properties that we approved, our experience has been that they have been well managed and they aren't having amenity impacts. So I think that's probably a relevant consideration too, is that most of the properties are well managed, not having an impact. So the concern about an increase in STRA properties starting to affect the character of an area is not necessarily something that we've seen today, and yeah, we just really haven't seen that today, albeit the number is 230 odd.
236. So based on that, if in the future, as you say, you discovered that there was an explosion in numbers of applications coming through, which was different to what you projected, you mentioned about bringing a report back to council. Am I right in thinking the only report you could bring back to council would be to revise this policy by further restricting the areas in which a STRA could operate in order to curtail the growth in numbers? Would that be fair to say?
Madam Mayor, in the face of it, yes, that's the way I'd see it, yes.
Okay. So, devil's advocate question, even though we re-advertised with a reduced number of areas, taking it into account the fact that I think your summary in your report says that when we re-advertised, of the submissions we received, 7 people were in support of what was proposed, but 14 people were opposed, suggesting a significant number of people were opposed to the reduced limitation of the areas. What is the officer's position about the likelihood of expanding the opportunity for short-term rental accommodations back into areas that are currently not proposed to be included, such as areas like Lathlane, where we heard a statement in support of the reasons why that might be an appropriate area for STRA? Mr. Cruikshank?
I will take that one on notice.
Okay, and that would go towards the advertising point, because this being a planning policy, my understanding of the rules that have been advised before is if council is proposing a more significant change than what was advertised, we would need to potentially re-advertise. But not sure that that is the case here, given we advertised it with a lot, then re-advertised it with less, and have received more submissions about opening up the areas rather than keeping them closed. Does that automatically mean re-advertising in planner world? Mr. Cruikshank?
I'll take it on notice.
All right, take that on notice. Thank you. Are there any other questions about this item? Councillor Minson. Oh, sorry. Can I go to Councillor Anderson first, and then I'll come back to you, because you have asked a lot of questions about this.
No, it's just a
Councillor
quick
Anderson.
question. I'm interested to know how many STRA we have registered in Lathlane. Did we
Mr. Cruikshank, do we have those details?
already?
I can try if you give me one moment.
I
Yep,
can take it
that's
on notice as it's just a spontaneous question.
Okay, let's do that. I'll take it on notice. I think
All right.
believe there's a filtering function here. Yeah.
And can I just clarify, for the sake of your question, Councillor Anderson, and what Mr. Cruikshank might provide by way of an answer taken on notice, when you say what properties are registered as STRA in Lathlane, are you talking about ones that have approval from before the STRA started on the 1st of January this year, or only what started since the state-based registration program came in, or are you looking for both?
What the town has had registered before the 1st of January this year. Yep, and yeah, do that first.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, it looks like there's 12
12.
in Lathlane registered under the STRA scheme, the state government STRA scheme.
And do we actually know how many properties are in Lathlane that have pre-existing approval for short-term accommodation under the old policy, Mr Cruikshank?
No.
Okay, right. Okay, thank you. So we don't need to take that on notice. Councillor Minson.
Thank you. Yeah, just to follow up on some of the questions asked, I guess to clarify, the town's position on the reasoning for not having a 10-year time period approval, one that could be extended, is that it's not, the amenity is not being impacted, or we're not seeing a gross impact to amenity, and also that we don't consider there to be that many that it's adversely impacting, I guess, housing supply and things like that. But putting, I guess, those more strategic questions to the side, is, I guess, the more direct consequence for the town not having a 10-year approval period. Is it just expected to be that difficult to administer a 10-year rolling approval?
Mr Cruikshank?
Madam Mayor, I wouldn't necessarily say it's that difficult to administer. It's just additional work to do, and there'll be additional applications come in, and just additional time required by officers to be following things up and to then be assessing applications and putting them back out for community consultation.
Yep. And I guess the crux of it is, having heard the discussion tonight, so some of the, they are risks, I guess, we're identifying, and they're not certain, it's all probability based, whether it gets out of control or it has an impact, right? But those risks, I guess, identified, does the town think, after hearing, I guess, that those be identified tonight, that the cost of administering a 10-year rolling approval window, is that kind of a reasonable kind of resource cost to the town, or does the town have any other, I guess, proposals to address some of the risks that we've identified here tonight, other than a 10-year approval, or would that be considered, the most effective way to deal with those risks?
Mr Cruikshank?
Madam Mayor, I suppose at the end of the day, planning decisions and planning policy should be dictated by planning outcomes. So rather than, administrative implications or resourcing implications. So if the council was to decide that the planning outcome and objective to be sought is to try and restrict the number of straws and put a time limitation in place as a mechanism to do that, then I guess that's what we have to work with, and obviously we'll do that. I guess in terms of other tools, I guess it's been flagged on probably a few occasions, is another tool for the town to consider is the differential rates for STRA properties. I guess STRA properties already have to deal with not just council guidelines and regulations, they have to deal with insurance implications, they have to deal with the STRA registration process. So that's other layers and regulations that might make it just too difficult or too hard or discourage STRA. Maybe a differential rate for STRA might be another thing that just discourages people from going down that path.
Thank you. And just to clarify that that proposal, you're just saying that, we create a differential rate class for STRA, and then that gives the council the ability to say up that differential rate as a economic kind of lever to put downward pressure on STRAs. That's the proposal.
Mr Cruikshank?
I guess I defer to Mr. Old. This question's been asked in a few elected member queries and probably would benefit from Mr. Old's response.
Mr Old?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess firstly, what were the intent of a differential? is there a legitimate reason? And that's not for me to answer, that for council to be comfortable with. So there is rating rules we have to abide to, so we cannot simply increase it exponentially or increase it out of proportion to all other rates. It can only be, I think it's double to the lowest in the class. So if it's 11 cents on the dollar, it can only be 22 or whatever it is. If you're looking to fund certain programs through the town, you would have to look at it quite objectively and say, well, for I think there's 163 active STRAs. That's what the rates team gave to me. So I think some are perhaps are not current or going to register. But let's say 200. So if you're looking at an average house of say $2,000, just for the sake of the argument, so the maximum you could probably do is 4,000. That's probably being quite tight. You may be looking at an extra $100,000 worth of rates if I've done my sums right. So the increase in work to make sure it's accurate is quite a lot. So there's a fair bit to it, and the biggest is the intent and the reason for doing it, and that has to be put out to the members of the public, just like the vacant land rate was, and we council have to assess those responses as and when they come in.
Thank you.
That's everything?
That's everything. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else? Councillor Gordon Manley.
In response to the answer we just received there, Maven, could I inquire about the additional administration work and whether or not we have an economic value of that, especially in comparison to $100,000 in additional income?
I can certainly ask the question of Mr. Old, but I think it might be putting him on the spot as to whether that's something he can answer at this point in time. I would have thought that it might be that that's a question we could only answer over a longer period of time, doing some investigative work into it. Mr. Old?
Thank you, Mayor. Correct. So it's for I will push it back. It's for council to be comfortable with what the reason for the differential is. So administration can give the advice if the reason is, and I don't want to put words in people's mouths, is to increase the supply of rental property. That may be a reason that you're comfortable with, that have to be advertised and the responses received. The number of the value of the extra rates, because that's ultimately what will happen. You know, you have to have a reason for wanting to use those for something, and that can be whatever council feel they want to use it for. So, but it has to be legitimate and stack up to the public argument, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not sure that was Councillor Gordon Manley's actual question, though, was it? I think you were more interested in the economic value proposition of utilising, is it the staff's resources to produce approximately the 100,000 in income? I won't presuppose. Do you want to do it again?
I think the value proposition there, the income generated from the additional STRA, is it equivalent or is it greater than the additional burden that we would put on?
Mr. Old.
I'll preface by saying if we wish to go down this route, we would have to do some more intensive research. But if you're going to have an accurate database, which we do now, you have to update it every month. So you have to check the STRA database, I guess. And looking at the numbers here that I've got, there's 164 registered, there's 53 that are expired. So all of that needs to be updated. You need to make sure the owner is, if they don't live, if it's not hosted, if it's unhosted, that it goes to the right place, that if people, they may be registered but simply live in it, they don't want to do it and haven't null and voided their STRA registration. I don't know if they're required to do that. So there's how do we deal with the appeal process? There's a lot of nuts and bolts stuff that are actually quite substantial. To quantify that would be quite challenging. It's just hard to know, but I dare say for $100,000 you probably won't cover that cost, to be quite frank.
Okay, perhaps something that might help Councillor Gordon Manley. Mr. Old, would it be your view that there would need to be an officer who is dedicated to do that work, to manage that on an ongoing basis? whether or not they needed to do it exclusively or whether it was just a portion of their workload. Is that how it would be managed? By probably somebody dedicated who's trained and does that only if it was introduced as differential rating?
I would suggest it through you, Mel. I would suggest it's another FTE. I just don't quite know, but it will be a monthly, weekly, fortnightly task we would have to do, just like debt collection or running the direct debit file, making sure the information is all up to date, it's attached to the right owner, and all that sort of stuff. So it's extremely hard to quantify because there's a lot of hypotheticals right now.
I think we're not able to give you a really good answer for that at the moment, Councillor Gordon-Manley, but it probably goes without saying that if the number of STRA properties were suddenly to jump and they exceeded 500 or 1,000 and we were doing something like differential rating for them, the workload would increase significantly for the town staff to manage like a growing number of STRA properties, but equally the rates take from those properties would be growing exponentially as well. So there could be a point in time, would it be fair to say, Mr. Old, where something like that could achieve some economies of scale, but be really hard to work out precisely when that would occur? Mr. Old?
That's correct. I based some of my comments on doing some research prior, because this has come up before, and Fremantle, I think, have about 450 or 500 of these properties, and sort of working the sums backwards, because we will still get rates from them anyway. They'll just be at whatever the rate is for that particular property. So it's a marginal difference that we're trying to look at. Is that marginal difference worth it from a financial point of view? You may have other policy objectives that you want to use it for, and that's entirely fine. I'm just looking through that particular lens, or making my comment through that particular lens.
All right. By way of comparison to assist councillors, when we introduced differential rating for vacant land, one of the express stated reasons that we went out to the public and advertised for was it was to disincentivise land banking. And obviously when we first instituted it, we put it on at a fairly high level and we upped it the following year. And so that did produce revenue generation into us. But am I right in thinking the amount of properties that we were probably running and managing that qualified for the vacant land rates, differential rating, might be similar to the numbers we're talking about for STRA? That be about right?
Mayor, if you give me 1 minute, I'll just get the financial report and I can tell you right now.
That'd be perfect, because that's obviously something we considered what needed to be done with regards to like vacant land and whether it would be worthwhile doing that, and whether it would achieve those objectives. So that might be useful to understand how that works. While Mr. Old is looking for that, are there any other questions in relation to this item? Yep, we'll come to you next, Councillor Cruiser. And Councillor Gordon-Manley, did you have other questions about this item as well? I'm just testing the waters now in terms of it, because I realise we've actually exceeded my normal 2-hour limit for a rest break. And so I would like to work out whether we think we're going to be finished very shortly or whether we need to take a little rest break.
Not at this stage, Mayor Van.
Okay, and Councillor Cruiser, do you know how many questions you've got? 2? Great, that sounds good. And noting this is the last item that anybody had any questions on, we will be effectively finishing up after this. So I think if everyone's happy that we press on for a few more minutes, I won't seek to call a 5-minute adjournment.
Mayor, if I can. So the audited financial statement, sorry, I just got to rotate the PDF, but I'll just do this right now. So there's 240 vacant, this is as at 30 June 25, so it might vary by a little bit now, but probably not materially. 240 in the annual report, plus 179 on minimums, so there may be some of these strata properties that are still rated the minimum, so that minimum can also be increased if we wish to. So that's what, 300 or just over 400.
All right, and in terms of the workload to manage differential rating for the vacant land versus managing differential rating for short-term rental accommodation properties, do you expect it to be more for the short-term rental accommodation properties than it is for vacant land? Mr. Old?
My instinct would suspect it'd be more for the strata. Having said that, vacant land may appear to be quite easy, but it's actually some intricacies to that. You know, when is vacant deemed vacant? So we usually go on the notice of completion. I think that's the right phrase for a building process. You know, basically you can live in it. So it's really just that point of you get that formal notice, whereas my limited understanding of this process, I don't know if we get a registration update each month or something, so we have to probably work all that out still.
So since we've introduced differential rating for vacant land, has your team assessed what the likely cost-benefit analysis is for the town to administer such a differential rating system for vacant land, or not had the chance to do that yet, Mr. Old?
No, we haven't. Not maybe just verbally, but not to any great degree, because I don't think it's already vacant in the system. So it's already category from Landgate, which is our usual primary source of information, whereas I don't think these will necessarily be the valuer general being Landgate. I don't think this will necessarily be a factor that they would...
This will be about the use of it.
Correct. So this is a layer over top. This is a different information source, which is where the complexity comes in.
Yes, got it. Okay. All right. Councillor Cruiser.
Is short-term rental accommodation that is unhosted a clearly commercial use?
I'm going to go to Mr. Cruikshank for that one.
Madam Mayor, at the end of the draft policy, there's a series of definitions. So you navigate and weave your way through those definitions, but essentially it gets back to a short-term accommodation premises, unhosted or unhosted, a short-term rental accommodation premises means a dwelling provided on a commercial basis for occupation under a short-term rental arrangement.
Councillor Cruiser.
Do we have any other kinds of commercial property in the town that we do not apply commercial rates to?
Mr. Old?
So I would have to look through the rates database, but I must make the point that the commercial tag or distinction for the rates, it could be a different definition than a planning definition. This is from Landgate, and they will assess it as being, I don't know if they drive past it or look on Google Maps or something and go, well, that's a residential house. The fact that it might be used for short term or something is, my understanding, is not necessarily part of their calculation. It's a house. It can be, slept and lived in. It's deemed residential. The fact that the owner may be a commercial enterprise or use it for commercial properties, as far as I'm aware of Landgate's methodology, is not a factor. But perhaps if you want, I might take that on notice, because it is getting, it's quite tricky. It's not my super intense area of expertise. So I will take that on notice if you wish.
I like that, not your super intense area of expertise, so we'll definitely take that on notice. To take Councillor Cruiser's question the other way, if a property was, say, a commercial unit and inside that unit was operating a not-for-profit musical band, paying the rates because they owned the property, but otherwise the property was basically a commercial unit, would that change anything other than the fact that because they're a not-for-profit, they might be entitled to apply for some kind of discount on their rates because they've got charitable purposes or something like that? But would that change the fact that it's a commercial unit?
Again, my understanding it's not. It's the intended land use. The fact that the tenant may be an FP or something is probably a secondary discussion, and they may fall into the waiver of rates or the exemption, which are actually quite different. There may be a council policy where you all things being equal, they need to pay rates. Just because they're not for profit doesn't mean to say they shouldn't pay rates. But often councils do have a policy, maybe in or rebate system or something. There's a variety of ways of doing it if they're not specifically exempt under the Act, and there's quite very tight clauses around that. But the land use, if it's a commercial unit in the industrial estate, it would be rated industrial or commercial.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll take that question from Councillor Cruiser on notice. Was there another question, Councillor Cruiser? No, that's it. Lucky last, any other questions about this item? No. That brings us to the end of 12.1. We'll get poor Councillor Biondi back in. She might have gone and, I don't know, cooked herself a dinner all over again. Yeah, had a sleep. All right. Sorry about that, Councillor Biondi. We hope that you found something appropriate to do with your time while you were out there. But look, that brings us to the end of the questions on the items that were on the agenda. Brings us to 15 committee reports. There are none. Item 16, motion of which previous notice has been given. There are none. Item 17 is public participation time, which I open at 8:55 p.m, noting there are no members of the public in the gallery. Close it at 8:55 p.m. Item 18, questions from members without notice on general matters. Are there any questions from elected members without notice on general matters? Nope. All right. Or close that. Item 19, confidential matters. There are no items on this agenda that are confidential. So on that basis, at 8:56 p.m, we'll declare the agenda briefing forum is closed. Thank you everyone for your questions and contributions. Thank you to the administration for lengthy answers tonight, and to those who watched us on live streaming and joined us tonight. Thank you. Good evening, everyone.